Bismillah. Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalami ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ba'd. We begin in the name of our Lord, and we praise Him, and we send the best benedictions and peace upon the seal of Prophethood Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. To proceed, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome back to the team, and also to all of our viewers. Alhamdulillah. Mashallah, today we're making a transition. Today we are going from speaking about the first section, which was mostly about theology. And we didn't spend a lot of time on that, mostly because, we're going to get that throughout the discussions that we have, to the new section, section 2, which is actually a section on coming to know ourselves and really understanding who we are as a people. And one of the things that I want to do in this section is really slow it down. Whereas in the last discussions, we were taking 2 and 3 chapters at a time, and here we're going to be going perhaps one at a time, no more than 2 at a time, probably. And so that we can really dig into the issues and really have detailed conversations. And having said that, before we even get into chapter 18, I think that it's important to point out, I don't know if everybody here is aware, I made posts about it and whatnot, but I was actually forced to change the name of the YouTube channel itself. So instead of being Message to the White Man in America, now it's Message to Our People in America. And the reason is because it said white man, they actually shadow banned the channel, if you will. So if you did a search and you put in Message to the White Man in America and you put in the name of any of our shows, or whatever you want to call these things, discussions is what I prefer. If you actually put in Message to the White Man in America and the name of the show, it wouldn't come up. They would have to go down, scroll down pages to find us, because they said that it went, saying white man went against their discriminatory standards. Just saying white man became a matter of discrimination, and so I actually had to change the title. So now it's Message to Our People, which is kind of ambiguous, and I don't think it serves the same purpose. But anybody who finds the page, I think they'll get the drift. And even with that, the message is universal, and it is for everybody in America. It's for everybody, right? But we had I had 2 purposes. One, of course, we're working through the book Message to the White Man in America, and 2, we are trying to talk to an audience who this message hasn't been given to them. So I'll just open that up for discussion and see where that goes.
I'm not surprised. It's crazy, but I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
I kind of expected it, to be honest with you.
Why?
This is the new America. You cannot discriminate against anyone except the white man in America. That's you know what I mean. That's my experience as of the last 3-4 years now. Like, it used to be a problem, like, don't discriminate against anybody. We shouldn't act like this against anybody. This is wrong against everybody. And now it's like, he's just white. It's rather annoying to me.
Carol?
It's a woke world. What can I say? It's a woke world, and sometimes we just can't anticipate what the woke will be. But the white man of America is being held up as the biggest demon on the face of the earth. So I guess we just can't have a channel that's talking about the white man of America.
The funniest part to me about the whole situation is it's white men in America trying to hold us accountable for the shit. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I got a little animated. I apologize for my language. I'm sorry.
What's interesting to me is this concept of wokeness itself, because what is the opposite of wokeness other than sleep? And you don't say go back to sleep, So even this concept of wokeness it's a means of actually controlling thought. Just using the term woke is a means of controlling thought patterns. And I wonder if anybody's actually done a study on that, because honestly, What does it mean to say, well, I'm against being woke? Well, that means you want everybody to be asleep, right? And so this term in itself creates a problematic, it in itself is a problematic concept.
Well, they get you to use their terms. They get you to use their terms by making it so popular in the media. So then you use the term so people understand what you're talking about. And it has a political meaning right now.
Yeah, I
So
was gonna say, like, I was referred to as woke about 20 years ago because I've been anti-big government, very distrustful of the government. And so I've done a lot of research into like messed up things the government has done to Americans over the years. And as I explain this out to people, and they're like, "Oh man, you really now woke is just unintelligent. Follow the narrative, repeat the taglines, if you will. These woke people more asleep now than ever."
Well, it's a way of trying to control people's speech,
Mm-hmm.
interfering with our constitutional rights in this country, and it's part of switching over to socialism. California is the worst state in the nation with this, and everybody knows once you go to socialism, you're giving up personal authority, and when you go all the way to communism, you have no authority. So it's just everybody wants to talk about it as a money system. The real problem is the authority, the breakdown of personal authority.
And that's the biggest problem with it, because most of them don't understand it. All they get is the pipe dream. We're going to have this utopia. Nobody has to break their back and work, and everybody's going to have the same things. Man, that is the most un-American thing I have ever heard in my life. I'm going to use my sister and myself as the example for this.
Hold on, CJ. Just give me a second, if you will. Because
Okay.
I want to take a step back. I just want to take a step back real quick. Adam, I don't know your politics, right? I don't know your political leanings and this and that. And it's very easy in these conversations to whoever gets the most loud gets heard the most, right? And so some things were said. And I wanted to know your thoughts on what's been said so far.
I mean, I'm an independent politically. I don't have affiliations with any.
I wasn't actually asking your
Yeah.
politics. I don't want to actually turn this into a political show per se. My thing is that for example, just the issue of being woke and this concept of being woke and obviously the three, myself, CJ, and Carol, are all against this concept, but and again, going back to what CJ said at the very beginning, that these days, over the last couple of years, that discrimination is, it used to be you can't discriminate, and now it's you can't discriminate against white. Yeah, you can't discriminate. Yeah, you can't discriminate against anyone other than white people. And I don't know your stances on these kind of comments, and so I think it would be interesting to hear from you. And I'm not trying to put you on a spot to confirm or argue or anything like that. I want everybody to have an equal say is kind of my point.
I mean, as a white person, I don't feel discriminated against at all in this. But I guess I know that there are some people that kind of write us off as white people sometimes, but really, I don't know. It just doesn't. I don't know. I just let it slide right off me. I don't really care. I think the more important thing to me, is
No problem.
I mean, we touched on it, I think, in a conversation before. It's just like when we were talking about trying to find out what your heritage is and being proud of it, and like, it's kind of hard to state that publicly when you are white. So maybe that is discrimination, but I also, if somebody's asked me, I would never describe myself as white either, though. So when people ask me, I say I'm an Irish American. I try and get away from, because whiteness is just a complete concept that was used to, we've talked about that before, to control and lump us all together so that they could control the other groups of people. you know. So
Yeah, it started as a legal term, actually.
yeah, so I just try and always kind of steer the narrative away from, like, I'm not, you know, I, I'm not I'm not white. I am, you know, where my family came from, you know, and they're not
Mm.
far from being fresh off the boat. So, you know, we still have a lot of our heritage. So
Yeah, no, that works
yeah,
for you. That
yeah,
definitely would work for you. It doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for me.
yeah.
But I can see how I can honestly see how it would work for you. I'm dating that. That is, like I said, I believe that we had this in a conversation before as well, and I hate doing that, always referring back. But you know, it's my personal opinion. Only white folk in America are actually white folk because we're so far removed. You know, many of us are so far removed from our heritage, from our European roots, and what's more is many of us don't even know them. And what's even greater, like I was having a conversation with someone last week, and they started naming like 4 or 5 different, you know, I'm Danish, I'm Swedish, I'm, you know, English. I'm like, okay, you can't pick one. You just can't pick one. So
Yeah.
in this situation, they're so far removed from any actual heritage, they've just become a white American. You know, and so in this case that works, but obviously in your case, what you're saying works for you. Alhamdulillah.
But I think that's the real discrimination, is that we can't, you know, that's the problem, is that we don't know who we are or what our culture was. And that was, you know, that was taken from us almost at the same time it was taken from, like, black people in slavery. When they all tried to lump all these things together so that they could control a group of people, they destroyed both groups of people, you know. So,
Mm. I think that, and I would hate to speak for the African American community, but to speak for them just very briefly, I think they would argue that the difference is that theirs was stolen from them,
okay.
and many white folk gave theirs up by choice, and so there's a difference, but the reality is the same. The reality, the consequence is the same, and that is that we're cut off from our roots. We don't know our roots. Um, CJ, you was about to go into your whole spiel on on anti-communism. So I'll let you finish that thought if you want. If you want.
A lot of these young folks that are yelling for socialism don't truly understand the ramifications. They believe that we're going to get this beautiful utopia. And when you start breaking it down and having an actual conversation with them, they don't understand anything truly about the concept. All they know is we're going to have utopia. Nobody has to work and everybody will be fine. I'm like, nah, man. Nah, that's never how that's worked. In the last 100 years, over 100 million people have died because of social, not just because the governments, once they've got all the power, they get tyrannical and they start eliminating people that they don't want. Every socialist government up to what 40 years ago, I believe, committed a mass genocide once they took power. On top of that, like, it's the oligarchs that run the system. The same people that are running capitalism here in America are still going to be the ones running things under socialism. It's just going to be more power in their hands. I just don't understand this younger generation. Well, I do kind of get it. It starts in the school system. The school system is horrible, and it's only degraded. You know what I mean? They're not taught anything real about life.
Well, that's
You
a
know,
serious problem. Go on, Carol.
no, I'm always interrupting everybody. There
No,
really
stop
is
it.
a time lapse, and it's really bad when somebody is overseas. So, I mean, we're all here, but I'm not trying to interrupt. I'll remember what I wanted to say. You can say something.
No, I was just going to say, you know, even academics, and I'm a big proponent of the trivium and the quadrivium style of teaching. You know, first and foremost, you know, I have 9 children, and all of my children but one have been homeschooled, and you know, I have children who are successful college graduates. I have 2 children that are in college now. You know, and so, you know, I'm a big proponent of traditional education, meaning the trivium and the quadrivium, teaching people the foundations and building from that. And what we see today is that really kids don't have to learn handwriting, when in fact handwriting itself is actually a healing modality. It's actually used for therapy. The fact is, kids aren't learned for handwriting any longer. They're not taught basic math. They're taught this, what's it called?
Common
The new
Core.
math. Yeah, the Common Core math. All of these things that is going on in our schools. But even more than that, most of schools, and when people argue with me about homeschooling, the number one thing they always bring up is, what about socializing? What about socializing your children? And I'm like, dude, don't you know that's why they're not going to school? But that's the thing, is that most of what's being taught in public schools now is socialization skills, meaning that you accept what the status quo wants you to accept. Today in the news, we all know what it is: transgenderism. That's actually what's being pushed in the schools today. It was homosexuality, now it's gone to the what's next, pedophilia. And so stage by stage they're teaching children this deviation. But they don't teach them economics. They don't teach them responsible economics. They don't teach them gardening. They don't teach them the basics of these things. And so the reality is that the school system itself is broken, and it's just meant to produce more consumers, more product. The children themselves become products of the system. And that's just the reality. I don't think anybody can deny that.
But when I'm thinking about this, and in the context of our chapter here, if I go to Europe, well, not like I go over there that went one time, big deal. But when you go to Europe and you're talking to people in Europe, you'll see, a variety of people. Some that don't want to take chances, some that do, some that are very passive, some that are aggressive. You will see that within every culture in some manner, right? But there was something about our cultures, the culture of Europeans that we came from. We came from a group of Europeans that had the idea of to give up everything and go somewhere and build something else. And for us to deny that is denying what was really our heritage. And that is a common theme with almost all the quote white people in the United States that have been here, whose families have been here, like say over 100 years or so. They were the particular type of Europeans that said, I'm going to start over, come hell or high water, and make something happen over here. It's not that we were not, it wasn't like the Germans that came were exactly the same as all the Germans in their country. It was a particular type of person that is willing to do something like that. And they came here. And for us to deny that history, we are denying what our ancestors went through. And by denying all and communism.
Say that last part again, please.
By ignoring that particular type of history we have, because whether or not you want to say all white people are like that, no, but there was something about our particular ancestors that were like that they would leave their countries where they were comfortable, or at least they knew what was going to happen next. Some people can't make that decision to just go, like they'll stay. For example, let's say okay, so there's not going to be any water in your area, so you don't sell your house and you sit there until there's no water, right? But the people that came were the ones that said, no, we're going to do something, we're going to leave. And that's a particular type of person out of the white collective mindsets that you see in Europe. And that is what came to the United States, people like that. And when we forget that heritage and we don't recognize it, we open the door to socialism and communism, because we no longer are accepting our own heritage, that our families were different. They were not status quo people.
Well, if I could play the devil's advocate real quick and say that we could say the same exact thing for the immigrants that are coming to America now from places, all around the world. I mean, we could literally say the same thing about other peoples today. No, I'm going.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but I would say they're more American than most natural born Americans. That same adventurous spirit that Carol is referring to. These people are exhibiting that. They want something better. Most of the time, they come here, they work hard, take care of their families, and they don't hurt anybody.
No, I disagree with this. I disagree with this. That is not the same thing that's going on with the immigrants that are coming now to the United States. And it's because people can keep both feet in both countries now, whereas before you couldn't. What they can do now is come here, try it, and if they don't like it, go home. That was not the case of our particular history of our ancestors. Unless you came from some aristocrat family that had a lot of money, you did not have both feet in both countries. People came here, they would maybe go 2 generations. Nobody ever went back to Germany. Nobody saw it again. When a war came out, for example, in my family, my father, when World War II started, he asked one of his uncles if we still had any relatives over there, where they were at, and his uncle just told him that time for that's gone now. It's finished. And it's a different mindset, because even my husband, he's not from this country. Okay, he came here as a student and he ended up staying for a very long time. It was not the same thing. He's going back home. This is, and most of the Muslims I talk to who are my age, who are, I'm 65, that are older, they all talk about wanting to go back home. Now, our families, when they came, they really came over with the idea that probably they weren't going to be able to go back home.
That's true. But if I may, and if I'm jumping on anybody's toes, please forgive me. But what I would say is that what I see, and perhaps you do see it, I don't know. I know that you're, I believe that you're in Washington State. So you're far northwest, pretty much as far as you can go.
Me?
But here, yeah, you.
No, I'm in California.
Oh, you're in California. Okay, well then you should be able to see this as well. And perhaps I'm wrong, but one particular group, and that's the South Americans, Central Americans, and even North Americans, because oftentimes we forget Mexico is North American, right? But we see these people, these Latino communities, they come and they leave their country behind. They cut the ties with their country, except they send money home. And they do what the Europeans did when they came here. They start their own communities. They build their own they build their own community from the ground up. They have something here. There's something here for them to develop, but they develop it and they make it their own. And that's literally what the white colonialists did in this country when they built the colonies. And we see this, and we might get upset because they're colonizing our neighborhoods, but the fact of the matter is that it's the same exact thing that the white folk did when they came to this country. And I can't speak about the Africans who come here, or the Middle Easterners who come here, or even the Asians that come here, but this is what we see from the Latin community. Again, whether a person likes it or not, this spirit of independence is what we're witnessing.
I don't believe it's quite the same. I think that back in time here, you had such poor people that came here that were just, they went across the entire ocean with no hope of even getting a ticket to go back home. I mean, that was the kind of people that were coming here.
But you have poor people coming across the southern border who literally have nothing, and they risk not only getting shot or locked up, but even getting human trafficked, getting caught by their people and sold.
But
so
they don't,
I mean,
their thinking isn't that they'll never be able to get home. They think somehow they're going to be able to get home. I'm saying there is something peculiar. I can't speak right. Peculiar about the homogenous white people, I guess you would say, that their families came with some idea that they were never going to be able to return. When I talk to Latinos and stuff, they all talk about like maybe sometime they'll go back or something.
My
mother never got.
They don't want to go back.
Yeah,
same in my experience. They don't ever want to go back.
Adam, go on.
Yeah, my son's mom is from El Salvador. Her entire family's from El Salvador, and they never ever talk really about wanting to go back. It's there's no. I've never encountered that. At least like you were in the Latina community there, but there's no. I'd never see a drive to want to go back. They want to be here.
Well,
Right.
since Salvadorans, yeah, they want to stay. But
Well, that's a Latina.
well, yeah,
we were talking
most
about
of the
Latinas.
Mexicans I talk to, a lot of them have houses across the border too.
Well,
And
that's true. I mean, there's truth in that, but these are going to be, again, the aristocrats that you spoke of earlier. You know, people who can afford multiple homes.
It's
no,
also easier from her side of the area. She's in California. The border's a lot
Right.
closer there. The
Right. That's
ones that
true.
come here that are here on the East Coast and larger parts of the North, they already know for the most part they're not going back, and they don't really want to. Most of these people are fleeing socialism, tyrannical governments, no jobs,
Drug
poor as
cartels.
poor can be, drug cartels. I know multiple people who walked from Venezuela, got to the border, and begged the border agents to incarcerate them for illegally crossing the border so that they could start the process to become American citizens.
well, sure, I know somebody who paid coyotes 3 times to come across.
And that's
Yeah.
the point that we're making, is that's the American spirit. That's the American
Exactly.
spirit.
Yeah, it's exactly the same. Yeah.
Yes,
And we're gonna be talking about this in a future discussions, because not only what does it mean to be an American, what is the American spirit, but also this issue, and this is a key issue here, is that what does this mean for us? Because I think that one of the things that our sister was mentioning when this topic came up is that these are people, speaking about the Europeans, but also any group of people who was looking at their situation and was saying that this isn't going to change unless I change it. And so they made the moves that needed to be made so that their families could succeed, so they could start something new, so they could build something new. And this is going to come up in future discussions, because we are going to be posed with the same question. When we look at this society, we'll go back to this term woke, this woke society where you have people promoting homosexuality. You have this crazy lady up in Erie, this crazy psychologist in Erie, Pennsylvania, talking about we're going to call them minor attracted persons instead of pedophiles, because pedophiles is, you know, all of this madness that they're trying to push on us. This isn't going to change. And so at some point we are going to have to make that hijrah. We're going to have to make that migration and build our own communities, build our own centers of places to build our own ideas. Because if we don't, then we're going to be swept away with the tide. If not us, of course, we're grown and we have our rooting, but our children are our children's children, and it's going to be harder to protect them if we don't build something. And we do, and we could point to the Hispanics again and say the fact that they have come and sought a new way of being and built, and again, I'll jokingly say, but there's realities to it, colonized communities. If we don't do that, then our grandchildren are not going to be protected. You know, that's just the reality. And so these are going to be future discussions as we work our way through the book, because the fact is the book deals with this.
Okay, but the Latino community has not forgot that. Wokeism is they're teaching a new image of the white man, that they came over here like a bunch of privileged aristocrats, snapped their fingers and went on, wonderful fox hunts, I guess, with their foxes and stuff, and just we're little lords over everything. And that's not our history. That is not the history of what we came from.
I think that with that regard, I would say that it depends on who's telling the story and whose story is being told. And I say that because oftentimes we hear the story of the founding fathers, and the founding fathers really was like that, right? But then you don't hear the story of the people who begged and stole and hid away in order for the opportunity to get here, and then they built themselves from dirt. You know, you're not hearing those stories very often, and so that's something that's not being told. And so you do hear of the armies that came, the conquistadors that came. You do hear the stories about the people, aristocrats who came, the Masons who came. These are stories that we hear. These are the stories that we hear when we hear about history, but we don't hear the common person, and so that becomes a problem. And this is what we have to start sharing.
The common person is what the vast majority of the immigrants were that came here among the white
Absolutely.
people. It was the common person. But it was a particular type of common person out of Europe, is the point I'm trying to make. Why did some of my let's see, actually my father's family, I think they all kind of came in a glob, but some came and some didn't. It's those ones that came, right? That's what we are, the DNA collective legacy of, or is of that, from that. If you want to look at it as inherited, or if you want to look at it as mindset, and that mindset's what's disappearing from our identity. And that's what more important, I think, than whether we're wearing lederhosen or if we can do an Irish jig. That is the biggest part of culture, I think, as much as I like Irish stuff.
That's a great transition there. And I was actually asked this last week. We were traveling, and this is why, of course, we didn't have the show. Our sheikh had fallen ill, may Allah preserve him, ameen, and this is why we can have the show this week. But the reality is we had this conversation in private, me and a couple of brothers last week, about what is culture. And somebody threw out the idea jokingly, and they said, what do you expect? Everybody to wear, what did he say? Cargo pants and button-up shirts? And no, he said cargo pants and flannels. And I was like, yeah, why not? And I told him, BDUs or cargo pants and Dickies shirt, or we have the shirts that Adam put us down with, and I have one on the way from Modesty Shop, alhamdulillah. But these the idea of having an American dress, that we are identified as Muslims. There's something about these guys. Look at them. A Nation of Islam, we know they used to wear their suits and their bow ties. They're famous for their bow ties. If we had something that people would recognize. So the question, I'm saying all of that because the concept of what is culture came up. And I do agree that mindset, I think that mindset develops culture and culture develops mindset. But what is culture at the end of the day?
Yeah, sure.
So I'm going to start.
Alrighty.
Half an hour later, we're going to start. I'm going to mention this ayat that's found in this chapter, and then we'll build from there. And really, there's points that I think are pertinent in this chapter, but I would like to hear what other people have to say. And again, theology is going to come up throughout our discussion. So this is why I think it's good for us to go to section 2. And that is, on white identity. What is white identity? And we'll be, going into this in this chapter. In this section. But as for this chapter, it's on coming to know ourselves a little bit. And regarding this, reciting this ayat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our Lord said, وَلَقَدْ بَعَثْنَا فِي كُلِّ أُمَّةٍ رَسُولًا أَنِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَاجْتَنِبُوا الطَّاغُوتَ. It's indeed to every people, God sent a messenger. To every nation, God sent a messenger telling them to worship God alone and to leave off, turn away from false deities of all kinds. Today, Taghut is like the nationalism, and Taghut includes the ideologies. Taghut is not just an idol. It's anything that people basically treat like their deity. They are devoted to it. They have reverence for it above and beyond what they have for God, or distracting them, turning them away from God. And so here we are told in this verse, and it's I think it's the 38th verse of the 16th chapter of the Qur'an, that to every nation, to every people, regardless of where they lived on the earth, at some point in their history, they received guidance from God, telling them to worship God alone. That is the message, and turn away from all false deities. There's one God, worship Him alone, and turn away from false deities. So I think that this is a good place to start, and after that, I think that what I want to start with, again, we're working from this 18th chapter, and that is that in this chapter I mentioned that God created Adam, alayhi salam, peace be upon him, the first man, the first human. He created him. He commanded the angel to go down and collect all the different types of topsoil from the earth. And if anybody did any research, you would see that there's white sands, there's black sands, there's pink sands, there's hard soil, there's mountaintops, there's all different types of topsoil on this earth. And the angel collected all the different types of topsoil. And our Lord, he mixed this with water and made a type of clay which Adam was molded from. And then God breathed into Adam a soul, life into Adam. And because of that mixture of all the different topsoils, inherent in mankind is the possibility that we could be white or black or brown or red, right? The possibility that we could be tall or short, wide. And one of the beautiful things that we talk about our motherland and our fatherland, and this is important. People resemble the lands that they come from, historically speaking. So that if you look at somebody from like the Peruvian mountains or the Nepalese mountains, Nepalese people tend to be short, but Peruvian people tend to be short and stocky, right? And why, I don't know, but you'll find that people who live in altitudes and mountains, they tend to be short people and strong. And if you look at people who live in plains, you find that they're taller people, right? They're taller people. Why, I don't know, but this is what we witness. And what's more, going back to another tradition, if we looked at the Yellow Emperor's canon of medicine and Chinese medicine, one of the things that they say about diet is that a people should eat the food from their ancestral home place. Why? Because you eat you're made up of that land. You're made up of that land. And so when you eat the foods of your land, so if I went to California, I'd be eating eating the food from another land. Whereas when I eat crabs here in Baltimore, this is the natural tomatoes, corn, all of those things are natural to my environment. So we eat the food, and that gives us health. Why? Because we're eating the foods of our land, which we're already made up of. And so there's a beauty here that we are literally made up of the land from which we come. And so the difference is the fact that God made us into nations and tribes, the way that we are, the way that our features are, we resemble the very earth which we come from. And I think that this is a good way to start, is that mentioning that we are all from Adam, peace be upon him, and Adam was from the earth, right? And so this is something that we have to establish. Our whiteness doesn't make us special. It does not make us special. It doesn't make us superior in any way, nor does it make us inferior in any way. And nobody else's hue or land or geographical origin makes them better or worse than we are. And this is it's important for us to make this point. And now, having said that, I'll open it up. I mean, I'm hoping that you guys all read the chapter before we got started, and you can just, whatever points you wanted to bring from that chapter, we can roll with it.
Well, as Muslims, that's a big part of our religion, not believing in some kind of racial supremacy idea. We don't believe in this kind of thing. I mean, hopefully we don't, because we're encouraged not to think that way. But that doesn't mean we're not acknowledging it or seeing it. I don't mean supremacy, but I mean seeing how we are and that we're all different, and we're different tribes, so we should know each other. It doesn't mean we're supposed to all deny our tribes and all turn into this big, I don't know, glob of who knows what. I don't know. What's being encouraged now is crazy. We should be thankful that we were born white. Our relatives who are part white and part not, they should be thankful of their heritage. We all should be thankful of our heritage, and we should all see something good in somebody else's heritage. This isn't like we're going to hate everybody. And we have our own heritage, and we have our own ideas and ways of thinking and the ways of enjoying each other. This is good. This is knowing ourselves and knowing other people. Seeing differences in people help us understand, we're a little different like this. You know what I'm saying? Like I see a difference in how this person's doing something, and I think, yeah, that's right. That is a different way of doing something. Maybe it could be a little bit better if I did that too. But it's not from the standpoint of being dominated by somebody else or accepting dominance from somebody else or dominating somebody else. So I don't see it that way.
We were told, we were made different so that we could know each other. That doesn't mean, you don't reject what you are. Yeah. And to know yourself is to know God. So how can you know God without knowing yourself? And that's one of the biggest satanic natures of America, is that it's like erased everybody from knowing who their people were, and it's kind of destroyed everybody's culture.
Well,
CJ?
Just a minute.
CJ?
I was just going to say, I view my culture as an amalgamation of everything that goes on around me. I understand I have Irish heritage, but I'm American. There's nothing. I'm American. If anything else goes with American, I'm Muslim American. I know my peoples came from Ireland, and that's cool. I've read up on a little bit of what the culture was like. Whatever. But I'm here. My family's here. My children are here. As far as many generations as I can relate to or look back to are here. You know what I mean? We're American. So I have no inclination to, I want to move states, but I have no inclination of leaving this nation. And I'm not going to run away from it because other people are tearing it down. I feel like I have to, as an American, stand up and help try to keep it moving on for the next generation.
That concept of that you're bringing up, again, this is going to be a future conversation, but that whole love it or leave it mentality, I'm very much against that, because the founding fathers themselves were not love it or leave it. They were change it, and that's
that's what I'm saying. I'm not asking anybody to leave. I'm not asking anybody to leave. You know what I mean? Nobody. No, I have no more right to this land than anyone else. Anybody.
And Carol, our sister said something. I'm sorry, Adam, was you about to say something?
No.
Oh, okay. Our sister said something, we should be thankful that we were born white. And, I'd like her to elaborate on that. But as we wait for that, what I would say is that, I think that all people, and there are people who are born disadvantaged. That's just a reality, regardless of what ancestral biology they come from. But what I would say here is that, I think that we should certainly be grateful to our Lord that we were born in a time and a place that affords us the ability to have these conversations.
Well, what I meant about being thankful to be white is I don't feel any guilt for being born white.
Oh, right.
Okay, so my ancestry happened to be a bunch of Germans and a bunch of Irish people for the most part, and a little bit of French, I guess. There's one of the families we don't have any information on that. I mean, one of the grandparents. But I don't think anyone should be ashamed of it. I don't think any Black person should be ashamed of their heritage or think it's something wrong with it. They should be thankful for it. It's what makes them them. It's what makes them to be a person which can reflect attributes of God in this world in some way. And what is wrong with that? We can decide to be human, or we can decide to be on an animal level. That's the difference between peoples.
And I think that this is a good point to raise here, is that as Muslims in Islam, what's absolutely vital that people understand is that rights and responsibilities are based upon our humanity. It's not based upon our ethnicity. It's not based upon our location. It's not based upon the language we speak. It's not based upon our religion, our faith. Our rights and responsibilities are based upon our very humanity. And I think that this is something that we all have to remember, especially when we're interacting with the other, whatever that might be.
Like you others in the room here on the computer. Yeah. Well, I just, when I became Muslim, I became Muslim at a time where it wasn't in style to hate yourself or to find some reason to dislike yourself,
No,
and I
we're
don't
we're
buy
going
into what
to
they're saying.
let
Uh,
me open this book real quick, because
mhm.
what you're saying is important. And let me see. Hold on one second. Um, no, yeah, I'm not seeing it, but there is a chapter in here where we're going to actually get into that very much in detail. That there's we are in no way at all calling to a concept of white shame or white blame or anything like that. I personally don't agree with that. God created, and this is the same way that I perceive it for myself, is the same way that, I'm sorry, CJ was telling me he got booted out of the room, but anyway, he'll come back inshallah. But the same way that I view this for myself is the same way I wish that someone would have viewed it for the African Americans in the past, and that is that God created me this way. And so how in the world could somebody blame me or belittle me or think less of me because of the way God chose to create me? And so it's not about my material form. And this is actually something that I hope to get into today. And I guess, again, now is a good time as any. And that is that we as Muslims, we believe in unseen realities. As human beings, we can only see certain frequencies. We can only see, one end of the spectrum and another end of the spectrum. And even the tools that we've created can only see so much of the light spectrum. There are frequencies and there are, F1. There are frequencies and there are, what can we say, vibrations that we humans cannot pick up. That's just the reality. And as Muslims, we believe that there are beings that are living in this world with us that we cannot perceive. They are on a higher frequency than we are, and so we cannot perceive them. That's just the reality. So we believe in angels, but we also believe in another creature called the jinn. And so, what's one of the interesting things about this is that this is one of the reasons why I came to Islam, is because it dealt with possession. It dealt with what's called ghouls. It dealt with what's called poltergeists. All of these things, haunted houses and ghosts and goblins and all of these things that are cross culture. These things are known to all humanity throughout time. Islam dealt with that and said, no, this is a reality, but you got to understand it's just another form of creation called the jinn, right? Like human beings, they have nations and tribes. I don't want to get into all of that, but what I wanted to say here is that, like we have Adam, the first human, then the first of the jinn, according to most, is his name was Iblis. And Iblis, he committed the first sin. God told all of creation to bow down to Adam, alayhi salam, peace be upon him. And the reason that God told the angels to I'm sorry, sorry, the dog was distracting me. The reason that God told all of creation to bow down to Adam was because Adam had something inside, and that was the ability to name, right? Nafakha, God blew into Adam the soul, and so we also have a soul, right? But more than that, God gave Adam the ability to name things. This is something strictly human. No other creature that we're aware of has the ability to name. And this is something special for humans, right? And so, because of that, because of knowledge, because of abstract reasoning, God told the rest of creation to bow down to Adam. Now, Iblis refused. Why? Because he was arrogant. Why was he arrogant? He was arrogant because he was looking at outward material forms. He looks different than me. He's made up of something other than me. He's outwardly different than me. So I perceive that I'm better than him. And this is an interesting thing here, if anybody wants to get a little deeper into this, that human beings are made from soil and water. And I think we talked about this before. In a terrarium, you have four elements. You have at the lowest level is soil, then it's water, then it's air, then it's heat, right? And so these are four elements. Iblis is made up of smokeless fire, which is heat and air. Adam was made up of soil and water, the lower element. So so Iblis said, I'm better than him. I'm made up of this higher essence. I'm made up of this finer matter, whereas he's this coarse being. Look at him. Look at his outward form. And so due to that arrogance, based upon the outward form, based upon materialism, Iblis refused to bow down. He disobeyed God. And when he disobeyed God, he became blamed. And when he became blamed, we know him to be Satan, the first of the shaitan, the first of the Satans, if you will. And the fact of the matter is that our reactions is what determines who we are. And this is where I'm getting at with all of this. So Satan, he blamed man. He blamed Adam. It's his fault I disobeyed God. It's his fault. If he wasn't this or that, I would have done what God told me. Then he blamed God. And then he swore by God, Be'izzatik, by your majesty, O Lord, give me respite, and I'll drag them to the depths of hell. I'll show you that I'm right. I'll show you that they're bad. I'll show you that they're rebellious and disobedient, right? That was Iblis's response when he sinned. When Iblis sinned, he said that, it's your fault, and I'll show you, I'll prove I'm right. So he started blaming,
I'll
right,
show
and
you I'm
lashing out.
better.
Yeah, exactly. Well, when Adam sinned, right, he said, I did sin. And then he asked God to forgive him. He turned back. And this is really the choice. And this is where I was going with this, is as human beings, we have that same choice. We can act like Iblis. We can be arrogant and look at the outward forms. And then when we get ourselves in trouble because of that, because of our materialism, we start blaming everybody else. Oh, it's his fault. It's his fault. I'm a victim. And we lash out at people. Or we can take responsibility and say, oh, my bad, and fix the mistake, right? And that one is the satanic character, which is what most people are doing today. And the other is really the Adamic character. Our humanity is that we rise above that, accept our responsibility, and make things right again. Turn back to God. Sorry for that long tangent, but I thought it was a fitting spot.
Well, the situation right now for the pale-faced Muslim is that people don't want to recognize that in us at all. And so we have a problem with our children now in this country, because it's one thing as an adult to deal with these things. It's something else. You can keep telling your children it shouldn't be that way, but that doesn't always work. So how do you instill children that still have the really good ideas, or the mindset that our particular ancestors had, that could put them through almost anything? And obviously it's through our religion and stuff, but it's also obviously in embracing these aspects of our culture that we inherited. Some of them, not every single one of them, but I find it very hard to see people that are like my father anywhere now. I'm just not seeing that same type of person anymore. I mean, it didn't matter what was going on, he was going to figure it out. And he wasn't from some hoity-toity family. He was half starved by the time he went in the military. He grew like almost a foot after he went in because he had stunted growth from not having enough to eat. So people like this who just push themselves, it's a little different. So I saw my father like that, and I'm not like him in that way. Maybe because I'm a woman. I didn't push myself in that way, but I certainly can recognize it when I see it in other people. And this was a very good quality.
I think that, to answer that, partly, it falls on our shoulders, because, and I say our shoulders, I mean myself, Adam, CJ, and those like us, because the fact is, and no offense to you, obviously, but we're men. And so it's on us to teach our sons to be manly, and it's on our women to teach them to be womanly. And it's on us to teach them that when they act womanly, they're accepted and loved and noble and dignified and protected in their femininity, right? But our role is really to teach our sons how to have that do-it-yourself spirit. Oh, it broke, let me fix it. Not let me call the authorities and see what they'll do for me.
I think
Yeah,
I
go on.
think that spirit is very much alive. I see it all the time, all over the place. But I come from like the very poorest of the poor of my area, so that's how you
And
have to live. If you didn't, we'd all be dead. You
that's
know.
I agree, and that's I mean your situation is that different because I'd imagine I don't know, but you probably have more farms or homesteads or things like that towards the south. I'm not saying you come
Hmm.
from that type of area,
Oh,
but
I do.
that's
Yeah.
what you see more. Whereas CJ and I, we come from a big city where it's the same thing, where we have poverty, and if you don't fix it, well, you just do without. You
Yeah.
just don't have it no more.
Hustle is real, man. It's out there. It's still out
Yeah.
there.
Mhm.
I think that part of this is and this is one of the beauties of having this particular panel is that we all come from such different diverse backgrounds that what's not seen in one area is definitely seen in another area, and yeah, no, I just think that I agree that it's definitely alive. And I do believe that it's more in the older generation. Anybody who was born after, I'll just say after 2000 is definitely a different breed of people. But it does fall on us to teach them this. My sons, I would say that my sons, and CJ, he'll bear witness to what I'm saying. My sons are men. My sons aren't a bunch of little boys. You know, and I just think that it's on us to raise our youth to be adults, to take responsibility and to take charge. And if we're not doing that, we can't blame society.
Well, yeah, maybe it came off like I was making a comment about men. I was really speaking more to my dad's ability to just look at a problem and then do his solution. He
Well,
he
I'll tell
didn't
you,
he
I'll tell
didn't
you myself. There's things I can't do, you know,
mhm.
but I'm not going to cry about it. And I really think that that's
Something
the
like that,
difference.
yeah.
Is that just because I see a problem and I can't fix it doesn't mean it's the end of the world. And I see that a lot of times in this current generation is that they can't adapt to change. I hate to say temper tantrums, but this is what we see in a lot of areas because they're not taught to. They're literally taught to depend on authority. And so again, I think that this goes back to what are we raising? How are we raising our youth? And this falls on the Muslim shoulders. And I obviously this applies to everyone, but here we're talking about the Muslims specifically, and again, it just falls on our shoulders. I will say that we do definitely see it in the older generations, but if we want to see it in the next generation, then we have to produce it.
We never had a um somebody on here was brought up Catholic. Who was it? Brother CJ or Brother Adam? Somebody was. Yeah.
Yeah, I was Catholic. I was raised Catholic. Yes, we
Something
spoke
about
about this before.
yeah, when I was brought up in the Catholic Church, we just uh we now no one I know who was brought up Catholic thought life was going to be fair. And so when they looked at problems, they didn't think, "Oh, this isn't fair. How can I make it fair?" That's not what the focus ever was. You know what I'm saying? And so that's
So
a
so
inherited trait. Yeah.
it, if I can share a story, anybody do any of you know who Juha is?
No.
Nobody knows who Juha. Juha is a comedic. How about Huja? Huja? No, Huja.
I know who you're talking
Juha.
about.
Okay, so he's a comedic character in Islamic literature, and it's kind of like
Oh,
simple simon. There's a
Hoja.
lot.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So it depends on the culture whether
Yeah.
they say Hoja, or Juha. And so my favorite story of him, and I'll share my favorite story, and then I'll share the one that I was going to share. My favorite story always, and CJ's heard this before because I love telling this story. But one day, Juha, he comes out of his house, and his neighbors are like, "Juha, is everything okay?" And he's like, yeah, why? And they're like, we heard a lot of banging in your house last night. And he was like, no, don't worry about it. My wife is doing laundry. And they was like, no, we heard a lot of banging. And he said, my wife just threw the clothes down the steps. It's not a big deal. They said, you don't understand. This was a lot of noise. He said, yeah, I was still in them. But so anyway, there's a story of Juha where he had a bag of walnuts, and some kids asked him for some walnuts, and he asked them. He said, "Do you want me to divide the walnuts up like humans? Right? Do you want the way that humans would treat these walnuts, or do you want me to divide them the way that God has divided them?" And all of the kids wanting to seem righteous, seem like they were spiritual in some way, because he was a qadi, he was a judge. So according to some stories, but anyway, they said, we want you to give them to us like God would, right? And so he gave one of them 5, he gave one of them 7, he gave one of them 2, and they started to complain, and he said, well, this is the way God has given out things. Everybody doesn't get the same. Only human beings try to divide things equally amongst people. But God has given you a little bit, and you a little bit, and him a little more. And that's the reality of life, is that if we all had the same, we wouldn't need each other. If we all had the same, then there wouldn't be this interdependence. And that's the reality, not just within ourselves or amongst ourselves, but even when we interact with different nations and tribes. Everybody has their own strengths and weaknesses, and so we build off of each other, and it goes back to that whole American mindset of not relying on the system, but actually relying on your neighbor, because your neighbor might be an electrician while you're a carpenter, and so you help each other. If everybody could do everything the same, you wouldn't need, there wouldn't be this interrelationship.
Mm-hmm. I think that spirit is still alive in the lower classes.
I agree.
When you come into my neighborhood or any other of the poorer neighborhoods, people are doing for themselves and doing for others, and they're not expecting any handouts because nobody's giving them handouts. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
And
I do hear a lot of the whining and like give me, but it's like the middle class and the upper class who's always had handouts. They expect to keep getting them.
I think that that's true to a lot of extent, except the only issue that I would have is that the middle class is being shrunk out.
Oh yeah.
And I think that the way that the system is right now, they're kind of almost trying to do away with a true middle class, and which means that you have a lot of what do they call it? New poor. A lot of people who aren't used to being poor, and now they're starting to taste it, and they don't know what to do. They don't know what to do. Allah Akbar. So,
yeah, look at us who were always poor, man.
Exactly. Take the example, right?
Yeah.
So Claire, she said something here. I'll read her comment, and then we could try to touch on that. She said, Americans come from a different.
Okay.
Huh? Say it again.
Here, I didn't see the comments. I'm looking.
Oh, okay. Americans come from a different ethnicity of white people, German, Irish Americans, whose parents married each other because they were the wrong kind of Christian as far as the English was concerned.
That's pretty funny, yeah. Okay.
I don't agree with that.
I would partially agree with that in the early beginnings, and I'm talking like the early 1500s. I would agree that people who were European and migrating to the colonies, I would partially agree with that. But a few generations in, and the European outlook was slightly different on Christianity at that point. They were more accepting of different versions. I mean, they still argued about who had the right version, but yeah, a lot of early colonizers were fleeing religious persecution because they were
No, that's
Lutheran
true.
or
That's
Yeah.
true, but this is the point. I'm sorry. This is the point she's making, from what I understand, is that the Germans would marry the Irish because, hey, they're Protestant. You know, it wasn't enough just to be white. She actually said this. It's not enough just to be white, but there was some. I disagree, because you had people, and coming from my city, you know, we had people, Little Italy,
okay.
where you're not going to marry an Irish person, and like somebody from Little Italy is not going to marry an Irish person from Butcher's
Yeah,
Hill,
no.
or a Polish person from Butcher's Hill. You don't intermix like that. That's how it used to be. So
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
you also wouldn't, a Catholic wouldn't marry a Protestant. That was a big deal, right? Even amongst Irish people, or even amongst English people, or the like. But
Right.
I don't think I don't think religion would have caused people to marry for lack of better terms, interracially, meaning a German and an Irish, or an Italian and a Greek, or something like that. I think that was taboo up until this last maybe 60, 70 years.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm just,
Well, my parents did it.
well, I think most of our parents did it, and that's,
Yeah.
you know, I think that's, you know, just the reality is that it became, in our parents' generation, or our grandparents' generation, it became more acceptable. But me, when I do my genealogy, I find German and German and German and German and German and German,
Yeah.
and this is what you're going to find. Every now and then you'll find an Irish person, but it, you know, the Germans stayed with the Germans, and the Irish stayed with the Irish, and the Italians stayed with the Italians, and religiously as well. So the Irish Catholics would be with the Irish Catholics, the English Anglicans would be with the English Anglicans, and you wouldn't find the Anglican English person living amongst the English Protestants, that let alone marrying amongst them.
Well, they
Oh
had
yeah, no.
ethnic neighborhoods. I mean, people had ethnic neighborhoods until I don't know when. I mean,
Till the
my
last couple of decades.
Yeah.
well,
I
I
mean,
mean,
up north, you still have them. A lot of the times up
yeah.
north, they're still there. You know.
Yeah, no, I mean, we have Greektown right up the street from CJ, and I mean, it's not Greek anymore. Most of it's Hispanic now, but it was Greek up until we was teenagers. You know, it was 90%, I'd say 80% Greek until we were in
Yeah.
our teenage years.
Yeah.
So coming back to this chapter, if we
yeah.
will, I think that the title of the chapter is Knowing Yourself, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, okay, so knowing yourself, and really what's talked about here is that knowing, and what is the major theme of this chapter, knowing ourselves, is not really knowing ourselves as white people. We will get into that through this section, but I think that the main thing is knowing that we're human. You know, I think that that's the major theme of this verse, is that we're all from Bani Adam. We're all from the children of Adam, and Adam is from the earth, you know, and really reflecting on that fact that we're all inherently from the earth and will return back to the earth. And we while we're here, every human being, all the tribes, all the nations, the German people, the Greek people, the English people, the Swedes, the Norwegians, the Danes, the Chinese, the Japanese, the Malaysians, every people throughout the history, every tribe throughout history, at some point in their history, received guidance from God, calling them to the worship of the one true God alone, right? And we're no exception to that. White folk are no exception to that. And the reality is that this life is temporary. We come from the earth. Our bodies will return to the earth, but our souls come from God, and they will return to God and will be reckoned for what we did. You know, the choices that we made. And really, that's what will be questioned about, is what are the choices we made, and why did we make them? And so I think that when we talk about coming to know ourselves, it's really knowing that we share with our fellow man. We share the human condition.
Well, and we also have our own condition by being made the way we look here today. You know, I mean, it's not just philosophical. I mean, I don't want to say philosophical. It's not just understanding other people. It's other people need to understand us. And
Well,
what's going on now is we're letting everybody else label us.
I don't think other people need to know us, right? I think that they need to know our message. But meaning for us ourselves here, I think that we're trying to call people to God, and so that's first and foremost. So we want them to hear our message. But the fact is that people, this idea that we have to understand one another. It's good to understand one another so that we can interact well. But honestly, somebody pushing their own agendas on me, I don't like it. I don't care for it. If somebody comes and they're like, you have to learn about, just Incan culture. You have to learn about Incan culture. No, I don't. No, I don't. And I think that we need to learn about ourselves. But other people, they have their own heritage that they need to really connect to. And so I think that the more that we connect to our own heritage, who we are as a people, the more that people will kind of, I think, interact with us on a better way. But I think the bigger impetus is on ourselves to know ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But as Muslims, okay, Islam itself, I kind of tell people this sometimes that it's a little bit unique as a religion because it's totally portable. You don't have to show up somewhere for a Eucharist or something or have a priest do something. You know what I mean? It's totally portable. If you live on an island by yourself, you can do almost all of it except bury yourself. And if you're part of a community, you can learn there and stuff. But it is in a community that people can excel by bringing different talents together. And so what is happening now is that white Muslims have become so isolated from the Muslim Ummah, even if they're sitting in a masjid, and isolated from their white heritage community, whatever you want to call that, and from the I don't know what you want to call it, the glob white man community, whatever that is. They're too isolated. And we're not getting to know ourselves in the same way anymore.
I'll open
It's a
this up
kind of
for somebody else to deal with, and then maybe I'll add. But anybody have any thoughts on that?
I seclude myself on purpose. I just don't like people. Like with all honesty, and Halim knows this. It's I just don't like people.
I used to like people, and then they ruined it for me. No, I'm joking. But Adam, you was going to say something.
I don't think I wasn't really going to say anything, but I don't know. I don't feel like I sometimes I don't know. I understand like the point of this book and everything, but at the same time, I don't feel. The only time I do feel isolated is sometimes at the masjid, but really I don't most of the time. And I never got isolated by any of my friends or family. So
Alhamdulillah.
No, alhamdulillah, no. I can relate to that, and I think that CJ can as well to some extent. And I don't want to speak for CJ, but we're not from a white community. We're not from a white majority community. And so because of that, a lot of what's being said by our sister, it's not really necessarily applicable so much in our reality. Right now, what I'll say about that, and this is what I was actually going to say, but I wanted to give anybody else an ability to speak first, is that, this idea of a homogenous white community, I don't think it exists for us. I'm not saying that in Montana it doesn't exist, or in North Dakota or South Dakota it doesn't exist. Kansas, maybe it exists. But where I'm
doing a podcast.
Okay, so my radio okay, on?
Yeah, I don't hear. I'm sorry, yo.
No problem. But where I'm at, there's not really that, and so I don't think that it's a matter. I think that what we do have to espouse is that confidence that we should not feel blame, we should not feel shame because of the way that our Lord created us, and I believe that we should network and we should build channels of communication. And more importantly, I think that we need to be open so that people who do live in that world, whatever that world might be like, they can enter Islam without feeling foreign, you know. And really, I think that that's a lot of, you know, what I'm talking to, is building communities where people can come into it and not feel like they're out of place because they're white Americans. So I think that, you know, that's really what. Yeah, go on. It's fine.
I was brought up in a town that kind of had a lot of different cultures in it for some unknown. Well, I do know the reason why. I just don't want to go into about information about the town. And as an adult, I became Muslim as an adult, not as a child. And so it's easy for me, whatever. I can pretty much ignore all that, but I did not find that was the case with my children. Okay, and when you see one of your children going to a masjid and lying, saying her mother is half some ethnicity that's also at that masjid because of the horrible things that were being said, there's a problem. There is a problem in the Ummah right now that is heavily anti-white, and it's having a bad effect on children. As an adult, it doesn't matter. Okay, if I don't like a
It
masjid,
does matter. It does matter as an adult
no, I mean,
because,
I'm saying is I'm not internalizing anything from it. I'm just like, oh,
but
this
you are.
sucks. Well, I just
But
don't
you are.
go. I just don't
No,
go.
but this is the thing, is that what you're saying is an internalization, right? You've internalized this, and it's a reality. We see it on social media and the things. You know, I just seen these Pakistani guys in yelling at some Danes about how they're taking over their country, and, you
Oh
know,
well.
talking about their women folk and this and that. But the fact is that we see this, and as adults, we'd like to think that we're not internalizing it, but it does have its effects. It does.
Well, I'm
It's
not
one of
saying
the
it doesn't
it's one
have
of
an
the
effect,
poisons.
but
It's one
I
of the poisons
never.
of social media.
This isn't the poison of social media. Social media was new. I'm talking about when I first became
No,
Muslim.
I'm talking specifically about
Yeah.
seeing these things that are happening in other countries that are not
Oh no, I'm
necessarily
talking about here. I'm talking
right.
about here. The situation is there was no masjid. I could possibly take my relatives to. I tried it twice, both of them. Just uh, it was a disaster, and I just couldn't take them. And then my own children, um, they didn't like it either. I mean, there was such prejudice and stuff that went on. It was extreme. Now, as an adult, I can ignore this. I can go and listen to a speech in a masjid, and I can understand. Okay, this is nice, and what this person said over here was wrong, because usually it's in the social part of the masjid, not the khutbah. You know what I'm saying?
Mm,
It's
of
the
course.
khutbahs themselves aren't very. I mean, they're not really offensive very much, except way back in the day, it was real get down on whitey in some of them, but it
So
wasn't
let
that
me
bad.
let me ask you an important question, and
Uh-huh.
I, for me, this is always the important question.
Hmm.
What's the solution?
Oh, I think I think Brother Rob's right that we need to have some kind of a sub community, and I think the techs are
Hold
part
on,
of the
hold on.
solution.
Just for context for Adam and CJ, when she said brother Rob, she means the brother in I forget the name of the town, but he's in a place up in Canada, I think London, Canada, or something like that. But he has a group called Islam for Europeans. And what the main thing that he calls to is not just developing white subcultures, but also intermarrying between white people, so that, you know, to preserve to some extent that concept of identity. So just to put that out there, I have an issue with that particular group, even though, you know, I'm with, you know, I communicate with them and things like that. So I'm sorry to cut you off. I just wanted to say this. My issue is that it's too broad, and so a lot of times you'll be conversing with somebody from Bosnia, or you'll be conversing with someone from Poland or Germany or England, and they're all speaking like we have the same issue, and we don't. We don't have the same issues, and we're all different nations and tribes. Even us, we're nations and tribes. And so they're like, just marry a Bosnian, and I'm like, you know, you
Well,
don't understand.
that's
A
not.
Bosnian is completely different from an American. It is.
That's
So
not.
the whiteness of a person's skin is not what defines them. and it doesn't change the situation between immigrants and the like. But anyway, that's your Islam for Europeans. So when she said Brother Rob, that's what she was referring to. I'm sorry, go on, sister. I
But
apologize.
my thinking on this is probably more radical than most people have been talking about this. I think there has to be a total taking over the authority of Islam in the United States into the people that are actually from this country, not from first or second or third generation immigrants. I think
That's not radical. That's right.
But I'm saying is, I think white Muslims have to do that. I think that whatever happens, none of it is going to help my family, because it's just, they're growing up. My children are adults. It for my family. I would like to see this improve for the next bunch of Muslims, because what happened was some people came to Islam and stayed around, and some people came and left, and some people just gave up altogether and became I don't know what that church is that's vegetarian, I forget, Seventh-day Adventist or something. I mean, they just gave up on the whole thing. And I don't know if I was one of the stupid ones for staying around for so long, or what. But
I was going to end. I was going to say we got 10 minutes to end, but you just brought up something very important, and it has to be addressed. It absolutely has to be addressed, and that is this the truth? Is this the
this
truth,
is the
Adam?
truth.
No, because you brought up a point that people come to it and they leave it, and we're one of the stupid ones for sticking around. And so we have to say, why are we Muslim? Why are we Muslim? And I think that that's something that absolutely needs to be addressed, because this isn't, yeah, we're a religion like other religions, but obviously we have a level of certainty in this. And so I think it's important for us to address, why did people enter it and leave? And two, why did we stick around?
Well, could I just go first?
Yeah.
What I was trying to say wasn't everybody who left. When I was talking about in the communities itself. Not everybody who left quit being Muslim. They just gave up on trying to beat their heads against a community that didn't want them. They saw the writing on the wall earlier than I did. You understand? I kept thinking everything was going to improve. I think I was very naive when I became Muslim and got into the communities. I was naive and I was overly hopeful. And I think, that was kind of stupid on my part. You know what I'm saying? I think I would have had a better chance with my children and stuff not being in the community at all. Does that make sense or not? Yeah.
I mean, are you asking me why I stayed Muslim?
Just the whole thing, just to deal with the whole thing.
Yeah, I stay because it's true, but I also don't I don't really see what's being talked about there as a problem of the whole ummah. I guess that might be, like I said, my kids go into the masjid and they never get picked on for being white. They never, it's not, maybe that community sucked, but it's not the whole ummah, I don't think.
I will say from personal experience, my own children, they are a novelty. And some of my children have been picked on. Some of my children have been, targeted for bullying. Thankfully, my children are a little bit stronger than that. But the fact is that, I do think that there's a novelty there, and an expectation that, oh, you're white, then
yeah, I see
X
the novelty factor. It's like we're kind of put on a pedestal, like, oh, I got one, but definitely treated with, I mean, every masjid I've ever been in, they treat my children like they were supposed to be there, and they treat me that way. So I think casting that as a problem of the ummah is like painting the whole Muslim ummah as like this horrible picture, and it's not like that.
I'm talking about living here as a Muslim living here. Okay, I don't have any problems overseas, hardly at all. I mean, I did get laughed at a few times.
That's still also what I'm saying. Like the whole American ummah isn't like that either. It's that it paints this picture that seems, I would think, if somebody was watching this right now, they'd be like, man, I'm never going to a masjid. And that's not I've never had that experience except one time when I first went into a masjid, and it was after 9/11. And every other time since then, my kids treated great. So I think it's, we can't say it's the ummah has the problem. It's that community has that problem.
Isolated communities. I would
Yeah.
agree in that. Even here in Baltimore, we have some communities who they don't welcome anyone. Like they'll do everything in Urdu just to keep non Indo-Pak people from coming to their masjid. Kind of. That's what I feel like. They're very unwelcoming. And the fact is that you have other communities that are very open and welcoming, and so it's really based on communities. And we also have to remember, again, one of the reasons we have this panel the way we have it is because America is an entire continent. It's not like a European country. A European country can fit in one of our states.
That's right.
And so what happens in one part of the country, that's not the flavor across the whole country. But no, I mean, I'm not negating that it happens. It's a reality. It is a reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In some places. CJ, did you want to add something?
I've never had any bad experiences in the masjid. I also have never taken my children to a masjid either, so I don't know. I haven't been in that situation. I really can't speak on it too much.
So I'll go back to this issue, and this is an important issue, and that solution. So I think that part of the thing is that really, where does the children's confidence come from that I am white, or I am whatever I am, my peoples are whatever they are, and I am Muslim, whether you like it or not. Because I don't see the Ugandan, I don't see the Nigerian, I don't see the brother or sister from Malaysia justifying their national origin. I don't see any of that. And so how do we instill in our children that same confidence? And I think that this is, if we're going to talk about these things, this is what we need to really focus on, is what are the solutions that we can instill in our children that give them that confidence necessary to stand up for themselves, really, at the end of the day.
The parents have to have that confidence in themselves, and then the children are going to mirror that,
Mm-hmm.
So you have to have confidence, There's no better way of teaching a child something than doing it yourself right in front of them,
Sister?
Oh, I disagree.
Okay.
You
All
can't
right.
fight a masjid of 500 people who are making cracks about white people, especially white women, in front of your children. If you're a white woman, we have a different experience in masjids. Most men will not start fights with men, but the women do.
No,
Okay.
that's true. That's absolutely true. That women's experience in masjids is different than men's. That there's no denying that.
Yeah.
And I wasn't saying like that's not happening. I was just saying we can't say it's the ummah. And that's
Right,
the
it's
language that
global.
was being used. It's a ummah problem. It's an ummah problem. It's isolated different community problems. When you say it's the whole ummah, it's the ummah, or the American ummah, then you paint this entire bad picture of us all.
When I'm overseas, I go to masjids and stuff. People act like I'm not supposed to be there because it's usually you go to a masjid in a lot of countries. It's neighborhood masjids and stuff, and it's all these people, and then it's like, who the heck is this white foreigner, and why is she in here, right? So I mean, that's different. That's like people are like, oh, somebody different is here, right? But it is an ummah problem because white Muslims have been around for generations, and people are acting like we're something new on the block. I know people whose parents were Muslim. I've met white people whose parents have become Muslim. I know black people whose grandparents or great grandparents have become Muslim, multi-generational Muslim, and we're treated like such an oddity.
There's a Polish community. There's a community in Poland. They've been Muslim, like an area in Poland. They've been Muslim for over 350 years.
Yeah. But I don't know. I don't know if I saw too much because when I became Muslim, I wasn't married or anything. And I used to go to different community things. I used to go around, and even in my marriage contract, it's in my marriage contract that I can go to lectures and stuff if I think it's going to be educational. When I got married, I was a little bit worried about I could get stuck with somebody making me not be able to leave the house somewhat. I mean, I don't want to do anything weird anyway. But I went and I continued even after I got married. I ended up marrying a foreign man who he would go to a masjid that spoke in his language. I used to go sometimes too. They split the days into English and his language, so it was 2 different nights. I went there. People had no idea I was even married or anything. And it was an awful experience. And it wasn't just one masjid. I went to many different masjids, and it was really horrible. Okay, so I'm one person, and it's weird. Most people don't go to as many things as I went to. Okay, that's a little bit unusual.
And I'll say, and I want to go back to what I was saying here, and that is that, you started speaking about the kids, and I interrupted you.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I interrupted you was to say that, it's not just the kids. And everything that you're saying, that is, and you have to understand that is an actual internalization of trauma that you faced in the Muslim community. And so that's a reality. And so it does affect us as adults, and we have to acknowledge that we carry these things.
Well, it affects, okay, these sort of things affect you, but it never came into for myself into some sort of self-hating white person, or I'm ashamed of being white, or I'm ashamed of the family I came from, or anything like this. I'm not ashamed of being white. I'm just not ashamed of it. And
There's no
I don't see
reason
any
to be.
reason. Yeah, I don't see any reason to be. And I don't see anything wrong with some Latino being happy about their heritage either. I don't have a problem with that. I do have a problem that so many white people's experience was getting shoved out of masjids. And whether you brothers have seen this or not, it was really prevalent, really huge, pretty much all encompassing, to the fact, like, why is it out of all the people we have to keep discussing white people? After 40 years, I sat outside one masjid. My husband's, I don't know if I told you guys this story, and I don't want to repeat myself a lot, but my husband's brother had died, and, overseas. And so he kind of wanted to go to the masjid. And I went with him that night so he wouldn't be by himself, in the car. I didn't want him depressed driving alone in the car, kind of, being the nice wife or whatever. So I went there. I couldn't find the English room. So I sat outside and I listened to it. It was so many kids out there all talking about how they hated white people. It's like, it's the same conversation that was going on 40 years ago. And I have been in and talked to imams at masjids. I have been in and talked to them. I said, this is too much. When you have people think we don't know languages. I don't. I know sisters that speak other languages, because a lot of white people ended up marrying foreign people, and some have lived overseas. People speak in front of them thinking they don't understand them. And what we're hearing is not good. And then our children,
And again,
we find out
I go back to this issue that I think that a lot of these issues are female issues. I honestly do think that a lot of them are female issues.
Well, the imams aren't females. None of the imams were.
No. I mean, I don't. I'm talking about the way that they're treated in masajid, because again, I've met brothers, again, white brothers from, who have been Muslim for 40 years. And they're major parts of their masjid. They're elders in their masjid. I met people who again, from Arizona and from New Mexico and from California, who they're actually considered as respected members of their community. So I don't think that the brothers have the same experiences that women have, and that's a reality. And as we wrap it up, because I don't want to turn this into a 2-hour conversation, but as I wrap it up, I would say that this falls on, again, our shoulders of, creating a safer environment for our women folk, creating, for lack of a better term, a safe space. I hate that term.
I hate safe
uh,
space too. I can't stand it.
for
Yeah.
you know, a place where our sisters, our women folk, feel comfortable and safe being themselves. So I mean, again, returning back to the chapter, I hope, and I'll let our sister Carol go first, and then Adam, and then CJ. I suppose just some closing remarks about, what we've talked about today, and perhaps returning back to the main essence of the chapter as we close out. Our sister.
Well, we come to Islam and there was no promise it was going to be real easy. Okay. And you believe it, it changes your life. Um, I can't imagine being something else. I can't be a different religion. I don't think it's possible at this point. I mean, I guess Shaitan could tempt me in something. I have no idea what it would possibly be. And I'm just saying that so I don't come off like some kind of arrogant person, but I can't imagine being some other religion. That's just not possible. And I hope people do not buy into this self-hating themselves. Our state is the worst with it. It's absolutely the worst. It's come to the point that I don't believe we can even send our kids to the school here, period, anymore. Which is when I went, they homeschooled sometimes and went sometimes when they were little and stuff. There's no way anyone should send their children to the schools because the schools are teaching self-hate, objectification of other people, and some weird hierarchy. Islam is not teaching that. Okay, but it is not teaching some socialist idea of that there's no differences between people. So I think we can embrace our heritage and we can be good Muslims, and we're going to have to try to figure it out. But that's where it's at for me. And okay.
Thank you. Adam.
Yeah, I mean, I think people need to get to know themselves, get to know their heritage, their culture, whether that's Irish or American or both, and whiteness and whatever you are, and be proud of it, and just have confidence and walk into the world with that confidence, and then just let things roll off your skin. There's always going to be hatred, and there's always going to be people that want to watch the world burn, no matter what religion they're a part of. And the only way really to combat that is to just be an example of the opposite. And so to know yourself and be confident in yourself and just lead by example, I think, that's the best dawah too, I believe, is to act right yourself, and don't worry about what the fools are doing, and act right yourself.
Absolutely, inshallah. CJ?
Try to teach my children, you are who you are. You know what I mean? You can't change your skin color. You know what I mean? There's certain parts of your being that you just cannot change. Like, go back to what Adam just said. Live life right. Be the example walking. Can't do too much more than that. I take no responsibility for anyone else's ignorance.
My own closing thoughts are going to feed right off of that and simply say, that which honors humanity, that which raises up and dignifies humanity, beginning with Adam, is knowledge. And so the more that we know, the more that we grow, the more humane we become, the more human we become. And it goes back to the fact that every single human being, we're all from Adam. Adam is from the earth, and we'll all return back to the earth. And in between that time, we're left with the choices that we make. And so we are going to return to our Lord. We're going to have to answer for the choices that we make as individuals. And that is ultimately, inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. Indeed, the most noble of you with God is the one who is most, we could say, most God conscious. And so this is regardless of where we come from or who we are. our ultimate humanity is tied to our relationship with God. And that for me is the ultimate message, is that, we have to know our own place. It doesn't matter that we're white. It does. There is an essence there that matters, because that's our conversation. We're here discussing, Islam in the
Our people.
context of the white American. Huh? Exactly. It's
Our
our
people,
people.
not the white American. Our
Exactly.
people. Don't get us banned.
Our
Oh yeah, our
people,
people, people.
So, so there is that reality, but we're part of humanity, and we shouldn't allow these other divisions to take away from our humanity ultimately. And again, I think that we want to talk about our people in America, but in talking about our people in America, we also don't lose sight of the fact that we share our humanity with our fellow man. And that's really how we'll move forward. Next week we'll go over the 19th chapter. Maybe we'll add to it, but I think that we took one chapter. We've been here for almost 2 hours, so I think that one chapter a week is enough. And I thank everybody for joining us. Anybody who sees it, please join in the comments. And I'll see you guys next week. If anybody has any feedback, absolutely share it, and we'll deal with that. Salamu
Oh,
alaikum. Peace be upon all of you. What was you getting ready to say, sister?
oh, I just wanted to say that all these things that happen to us, if we remember that God,
You broke off.
oh, God created everything,
Mm.
and everything He created was good. Then there is a goodness in everything we see here, and sometimes our experiences, even if they're not what we would judge as optimal, make us what we are. And it's sometimes the bad isn't so bad in the sense of what it helps you to understand in life. Yeah.
We'll say again, pulling from the Quran, فَإِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا إِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا. Indeed, with every difficulty comes ease. Indeed, with every difficulty comes ease. And so, for our difficulties that we face in this life, there is ease that comes along with it. And we'll suffice with that. We'll say, Salamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta,
All right.
astaghfiruka wa atubu
Assalamualaikum,
ilayk.
everybody.
Peace be upon all of you.
I don't know how to get out of here.